With this in mind, let me speak to two groups of people again. First, non-Christians and then Christians. To the non-Christians, here's what I notice. That our world today is becoming increasingly secular, which means fewer and fewer people believe in God. But I also notice that more and more people have a concern for justice. They want the hungry to be fed. They want those who are suffering for their suffering to be alleviated. They want there to be justice for the poor and the oppressed and the hurting. Respectfully, I ask you to think through your mental framework. If there is no God, why bother feeding the poor and taking care of the hungry? Why be concerned about those who are weak and suffering? Now, here's the reason I say that. If you just look at nature itself, just look at these pictures. This is what nature is. It's survival of the fittest. It's the strong dominate the weak. It's the way in which species advance and take care of themselves. This is the way of survival. It's what nature is. The weak go away and the strong survive. And if you don't believe in God, then why should you rail against this? This is just the way it is. Let me tell you why you rail against this. Because somewhere deep down you know He's there. You know He's there. You know that He created us in His image, that no matter whether someone's weak or strong, they're not throwaway, that they matter and that they care. And I just respectfully ask you to think through your mental framework. If you're concerned about justice and helping people who are suffering, and I think you should be, the only mental framework that makes sense is that there is a God and we're created in His image. Jesus saying, I am the bread of life, that He came to feed the hungry, that He came to heal the sick, that He came to raise the dead, that He came to calm the storms. If that's who Jesus is and we're His followers, then we should have a passion for the things that concern Him. We should care about people, and especially in this time when people are hurting, when people are suffering, we have got to have a heart to love people, to care for them, to be at work to feed them, to clothe them. And I would just urge and ask you to be at work, especially at this time, caring for those who really need help. Okay, so we've seen that this statement, I am the bread of life, engages our mind and intellect. We've seen that it's for our body. But ultimately, I believe that when Jesus said, I am the bread of life, He was speaking to the depths of our soul. When people came to Jesus, this is what He said to them. He said, do not work for food that spoils, but for food that endures to eternal life, which the Son of Man will give you. I hope you hear what Jesus is saying. While food that feeds our body is of some value, this statement, I am the bread of life, speaks to something much deeper. And that something much deeper is this, that all of us have hungers and needs which nothing in this world can satisfy except Jesus Himself. Now, to see that, I want you to just think about what it is that turns our heads. Beautiful people, wonderful cars, big mansions, new gadgets. Why is it that we turn our head and look after these things? And I just suggest it's because this is what we're thinking, that if we had those things, if all of a sudden there was a beautiful person on my arm, if all of a sudden I lived in a big mansion, if all of a sudden I was driving a new fancy car, if I had that new gadget, this is what we think. Then I'll be satisfied. Then I won't feel any hunger. Then I'll be content. But you know that's not true. You know that a house, a beautiful person, a new car, it might help in some way, but ultimately there's something much deeper. We're not satisfied by the things of this world. I love what Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6. He says, don't store up for yourselves treasures here on earth, where moth and rust destroy and thieves break in and steal. Instead, He says, store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moth and rust don't destroy and where thieves don't break in and steal. And now this is what Jesus is getting at. When He says, I am the bread of life, He is saying that if we come to Him, that's where our needs will truly be satisfied.